Welcome everyone to History Gone Wilder, part of Half History Will Travel. I am your host, the Wilder Historian, and as Union and Confederate forces concentrated along the West Chickamauga Creek, the Battle of Chickamauga was about to unfold. On September 18th, Braxton Bragg wanted his Confederate Army to cross West Chickamauga Creek at various locations north of the Union main line and cut it off from Chattanooga, and by attacking its left flank, drive it south. Guarding the fords and bridges across the creek were Federal cavalry under Colonel Robert Minty and mounted infantry equipped with Spencer repeating rifles under Colonel John T. Wilder. To the north, Minty would come into contact with elements of Longstreet's corps under Brigadier General Bushrod Johnson. The Confederate infantry didn't have cavalry to scout ahead of them, so Johnson sent out Colonel Fulton's brigade to probe the Union position. Around this time, General Nathan Bedford Forrest arrived with a handful of his cavalry and began working his way around the flank of Minty's line. Just before noon, Minty withdrew closer to the bridge to shore up his battle line. Minty could see dust clouds rising up to the northeast and feared that Confederate troops would attempt to outflank him using the bridges and fords to the north, so he asked Wilder for help. Wilder sent Minty part of his brigade to watch those locations while Minty engaged with Forrest and Johnson. Forrest would take Fulton's 17th Tennessee and his own cavalry to the south in an attempt to capture what he thought was Minty's camp. When Johnson and Fulton crossed a ridge, they could see how small the Union force was, so Johnson called up for Gregg's brigade to align on Fulton's right and McNair to fall in behind to act in a supporting role for the other two brigades. Braxton Bragg's plan to quickly cross the creek and unite his army on the other side for a major assault in order to flank the Union left and be able to push it further south had hit a snag at Reed's Bridge. While Johnson worked to outflank Minty, Wilder's men guarded Alexander's Bridge to the south. After sending aid to Minty, Wilder only had Company F and A of the 72nd Indiana, 5 companies of the 98th Illinois, and the 17th Indiana to guard his sector. He also had many men posted at various fords along the creek so that the Confederates could not launch a surprise flanking maneuver. Brigadier General St. John Liddell ordered Walthall's Mississippi Brigade forward to take the bridge. However, the thick underbrush disrupted the brigade's battle lines, and each regiment arrived at different times. Plus, Company A of the 72nd Indiana had ripped up the floor of the bridge and created a breastwork out of its pieces. Although some of the Mississippians made it into the creek and attempted to outflank the outnumbered Federals, the firepower from the Spencer rifles created a bloody stalemate. By a little after noon, the Confederates had thrown elements of 2 divisions against the 2 diminished Union brigades and hadn't been able to drive off the stubborn Federals, and the day was quickly passing. Bragg had planned for them to already be across the creek and well on their way attacking the Union from a northerly direction. To the north, Minty had pulled back across Reed's Bridge, giving ground each time that Johnson's infantry aligned themselves for an attack. Minty's men had ripped up the planks after crossing and threw them into the creek below, which carried them downstream. Johnson now had to work to get across Chickamauga Creek, all the while under fire from Union's small arms and artillery fire. The 23rd Tennessee ripped boards from the Reed house and barn and repaired the bridge. Fulton's troops formed up, with skirmishers providing cover fire against Union musketry, and filed across the bridge to the other side. Gregg's men waited across the creek to the north so that they could form on Fulton's right. Meanwhile, Forrest's cavalry used 2 fords upstream to cross the creek and finally made it to the west side of the waterway. However, it was late in the day, and both Minty and Wilder knew that they were soon to be flanked if they stayed where they were, so they pulled back nearly 2 miles. Johnson was now under the direct command of Major General John Bell Hood, who had just arrived on the field with his arm still in a sling from his wounding at Gettysburg. Walker's divisions abandoned the attempt to cross at Alexander's Bridge and moved downstream and crossed there. Additionally, Buckner's 2 divisions were beginning to cross the creek. Hood and Johnson pushed south after crossing the creek, and there would be one more stand before darkness covered the field. Wilder held a position east of Vineyard Field and asked Minty to form on his right. Major General Thomas Crittenden and one of his division commanders, Brigadier General Thomas J. Wood, arrived on the field and concluded that no further attack would be made and that there was no substantial Confederate force on that side of the creek. Earlier, when Minty reported to Crittenden about Longstreet's corps being at Ringgold, Crittenden had brushed the information aside, declaring that Longstreet was still in Virginia. Wood examined Wilder's line, and as he did, Johnson's division came into view. Wood frantically rode off to alert Crittenden, who ordered the closest Federal brigade to Wilder's aid. That would be Colonel George F. Dick's brigade of Horatio Van Cleve's 3rd Division. Johnson's men rushed forward and attacked Wilder's line, but like most night battles of the war, not much came of the attacks, and the firing faded away as Johnson withdrew his men a short distance and had them build impromptu breastworks. Together, the small commands of Minty and Wilder had delayed vastly superior Confederate columns for hours, and by extension, threw the timetable for Braxton Bragg's attack plan off schedule an entire day.